Good afternoon. My name is Terry Robinson, and I had the great pleasure of teaching your children this week. This is the STEM Communication Class Award Ceremony and Showcase. We're going to be talking about climate change today, and you're going to hear some really, really interesting speeches about it. Our class, go ahead and click to the next slide. Our class was awesome. We were small but mighty. We persevered through all kinds of technical issues this week, including storm systems that decided to take out large portions of people's Wi-Fi capability. But we managed to work through it, and I'm so proud of these kids because even through all the difficulties we've had with tech issues this week due to weather primarily, they have still managed to come through and write great speeches, have wonderful visual aids, and they're going to have some really good presentations. I can't wait for you to see those. Uh, Terrific kids, small but mighty, and really, really good class. Helping me out this week is Nicole, and she's going to say a few words.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I had the pleasure of working with all of your kids this week. We did face some hurdles when it came to connectivity and food, if Andrea, when we were talking about Andrea, but we had a great week this week and we persevered and overcame all of those barriers, and it led to a great result. So I can't wait for you guys to see what your kids have been working on this week.
One thing that Capital Debate likes to do is find out what you think about the job that we're doing. So we really would like to, for the students and the parents alike, to fill out a survey form. We'd like to know what you think that we can do better. What can we improve on? Capital takes these surveys very seriously. I'm going to assure you that they all get read. Every single response from every single person gets read. And oftentimes they will make adjustments in programming or in the way that we do certain things based on suggestions from either students or parents. I've seen those changes happen before myself, so I know that that is what happens. If you have a compliment to give, we would certainly love to hear that as well. But we're all about making things better and improving constantly. So the parent survey is listed there, and the student survey is a slightly different website. Now these website addresses are going to be emailed to you, so you don't have to worry about like writing them down right now. But we really, really would like for you to take just a few minutes and fill that out for us. Thank you so much on that. Now, I don't quite yet. If your students are planning to take, we have 2 more weeks of programming, and I believe that what we're offering is the debate, public speaking debate 101 next week, and then debate 201 the following week. If you're interested in signing up your student for either of those classes, that coupon code is next class 2020, and there would be $50 off that camp. Programs that we offer are legal communication, business communication. I think a couple of students in this class already took the business communication class, interpersonal communication, and of course, this is the STEM communication class. After taking 101 and 102, we also offer a 301, a 401, and during the fall, we'll be starting our club league, which is a debate league that students from all over the country can participate in. There are going to be, well, I think that's going to be on the next slide. So wait just a second, talk about it. If you have questions about any of those classes or any of the programming that we have, you can contact team@capitaldebate.com, or you can call that phone number 800-450-5012, and that somebody would be happy to help you and answer any questions that you might have. This debate league is really a fun thing, and especially I think this year when so many schools are not going to be able to offer a lot of their in-person opportunities other than class type things, that it's another activity for kids to do so that they're not just doing schoolwork all year long. There's a monthly debate tournament for these programs. There's a class, it's a once a week class for an hour, usually on Tuesday or Wednesday night. And then there would also be workshops and clinics available on weekends for kids who would like some additional help. They would be in a small class similar to this and would have one-on-one instruction. So you'd have an instructor who would have usually 4 to 6 students who they're working with, helping them write debate cases, helping on their presentation and different types of skills. And it's a lot of fun. And again, you can contact Capital Debate and they can give you some more information about some of those things. But there's also a discount on that until August 14th. You can save up to $100 on registering for the 2021 Debate League. It's going to be divided into 4 sessions of basically 2 months each. You could sign up for one session or you could sign up for all 4. And we always want you to keep in touch and let us know what's going on and what you're doing. And those are those same contact numbers you saw on the previous slide, team@capitaldebate.com, and the phone number is 800-450-5012. Well, I absolutely adore these children. And so it's time to present them with their certificates. These certificates will also be sent directly to them later on by the Capital Debate office staff. They'll be taking care of that. Our first student is Andrea, who has the most wonderful smile on the planet and is delightful. She's got a terrific speech she's going to give for you, and we can't wait to hear it. Jonathan. Jonathan, I really should call him Professor Jonathan because he is so smart. He has a tremendous grasp of some very technical concepts, but he does a terrific job of explaining them in his speech, and his graphics and his visual aid do a wonderful job of really breaking down some complex concepts into simple terms that regular people can understand. So this is going to be a really terrific speech as well. Our next student is Jack. Jack wins the Survivor Award. This Jack is the only student in class who did not have a Wi-Fi issue at all this week and was there for every minute of every day, and always cheerful and willing to do whatever we ask him to do. And he also has a great speech for you. And I think it's really interesting because Jack is from New York and a lot of his examples are regarding New York. So I think it's a very personal speech in that respect. It's going to be very good. And last but certainly not least is Alex. Alex has worked very hard on his speech, and he has persevered despite numerous Wi-Fi issues. And we can't wait to see what he's going to be presenting for you today. I think we're ready to set up for our first speaker. Yes. Okay. We're just going to shift our slideshow here real quick. All right. Our first speaker today is going to be Jack, who is going to speak on the topic climate change's effect on extreme weather.
According to the New York City government, Hurricane Sandy resulted in the deaths of 44 city residents and inflicted an estimated $19 billion in damages and lost economic activity across New York City. Most importantly, over 69,000 residential units were damaged and thousands of New Yorkers were temporarily displaced. What if I told you that there is a rising chance in an even more brutal hurricane to arise because of climate change, devastating even more innocent Americans and maybe even you? Your house could be flooded, possessions lost, and even your closest friends gone. Climate change leads to the rise in frequency and intensity of extreme weather, like hurricanes, extreme precipitation, and extreme heat. My first point is climate change leads to the rise in frequency and intensity of hurricanes. The Environmental Defense Fund states, climate change takes part in causing hurricanes to become more devastating because of rising sea levels. Rising sea levels means wind from hurricanes would push more water on land. Climate change takes a part in rising sea levels because warmer water means it would expand more, meaning sea levels would rise. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration says for a hurricane to form, thunderclouds must first move across the surface of an ocean. If the ocean is warm, the storm will suck up heat energy like a straw would suck up liquid and create moisture. If the wind conditions are right, this would result in a hurricane. This means that heat energy from warmer oceans means fuel for hurricanes, and warmer oceans result from climate change. Climate change can also result in more rainfall from hurricanes. Warmer atmosphere means more evaporation, which means more water vapor in the air. This water vapor will be used by hurricanes to be turned into rainfall, resulting in more rainfall from hurricanes. My second point is the rise in frequency and intensity of extreme heat. The greenhouse effect is where sunlight travels to Earth's atmosphere. Some of it is reflected, but some of it is absorbed by the Earth and later resent back to the atmosphere. Greenhouse gases in the atmosphere send it back down to the Earth, essentially warming up the Earth and the atmosphere. If there's an increase in greenhouse gases, that means more heat would be trapped and temperatures of Earth and the atmosphere would drastically rise. The New York Times says a 1 degree increase in the average of temperature means a tenfold increase in the frequency of 100-degree days. As you can see on the chart, if there is an increase in the average temperature, the bell graph moves to the right, where the probability of hot weather and extremely hot weather drastically increase. From Washington Times states, oceans absorb heat from global warming. This means that there is more moisture for weather systems and air will become more humid. When air is at its full saturation, it cannot take in any extra moisture. That means sweat will evaporate slower, which means body temperatures will heat up to abnormal degrees, and you could possibly faint or have a stroke. My final point is climate change results in the rise of frequency and intensity of extreme precipitation. The US Global Change Research Program says a warmer atmosphere can contain more water vapor, and more water vapor can later be used for rain, which means an increase in the amount of rainfall overall. The National Climatic Data Center says climate change can result in an increase of snowfall. This is because warmer ocean surfaces mean more moisture to feed into storms. So if it begins to snow, there'll be more moisture for snow to form, resulting in a greater amount of snowfall in certain areas. The European Academy's Science Advisory Council shows two graphs on the increase of extreme weather and on the increase of global land and ocean temperature. As you can see, there's a clear relationship from these two graphs. As global land and ocean temperature rises, extreme weather rises at the same years. In the late 1900s and 2000s, there was a clear increase in both graphs, meaning climate change impacts extreme weather, such as flood and storms. To bring to a close, climate change is an important factor in the frequency and intensity of extreme weather, like hurricanes, extreme heat, and extreme precipitation. You can expect an increase in severe weather because of our own actions. People can faint or die from heat strokes. Crops and livestock can be washed away by extreme rain, and cities can be damaged by hurricanes, costing lives and money. If we continue to burn fossil fuels and cut down our forests, you can expect to live in a world where the risk of extreme weather is right around the corner.
Thank you so much, Jack. Our next speaker is Andrea, and she will be speaking about rising sea levels. Unmute yourself, Andrea. Andrea, unmute yourself.
Okay, start all over. Doesn't everyone dream of pleasantly lounging on a nice beach under the warm shade of an umbrella with the occasional breeze combing through your hair? Your biggest worry is the red tinge slowly creeping onto your skin. However, for now, this is just a goal for you. And goals are good. Goals motivate you and allow you to work through and persevere through tough times in your life. However, have you ever wondered that this goal of yours might just disappear? Your perfect seaside vacation, your favorite seaside restaurant might just be gone one day? Now the question is, why would it be gone? How would it be gone? And the answer to that is global warming. Global warming is causing sea levels to rise, and rising sea levels will have disastrous consequences, including flooding, extreme economic costs, and other severe environmental impacts. My first point as to why rising sea levels will have negative impact is flooding. As the mass of the ocean increases, water-related disasters such as hurricanes, floods, coastal storms, breaking waves, extremely high tides, and storm surges will all become more frequent as well as more intense. And as the sea level rises, the places that these storms can reach will be further. They will reach further inland and be able to destroy more. According to the NOAA, historical flooding that once happened once every century has been becoming more frequent, and by the mid-late of this century, it will begin to happen every decade or less. Nuisance flooding is a type of tidal flooding. It gets its name from the fact that it has a minor impact. And although nuisance flooding is not very life-threatening, it is very disruptive as well as very expensive. According to the US Global Change Research Program, nuisance flooding compared to 50 years ago has become 6 times more frequent in coastal communities. And according to the National Geographic, in the US, around 40% of people live in high population density coastal areas. And as you will see on the next slide, which has a map of population density on the coasts of countries, the coasts are quite dense, and this means that all these people are at risk of their communities and homes being destroyed by water. Now, floods are very important. However, more important is the preparation and recovery from these. An example of not being prepared was when Hurricane Sandy hit. All along the East Coast, homes were destroyed, thousands became homeless, and even 5 years later, people were still rebuilding. According to C40 Cities Climate Group, if we focus in on New York, after the storm passed and New York rebuilt a bit, They reflected and found that the reason the storm had such a big impact on them was because they didn't have sufficient plans to deal with it, and Hurricane Sandy had been extremely unexpected, since everyone had thought that Hurricane Sandy would go out into the ocean instead of continuing along the coast. Since this was unexpected, 2 million people lost power, and although this is not a huge impact, it did slow down the rate of recovery. And the 90,000 buildings that were heavily damaged, since no one expected that Hurricane Sandy would come, no one had flood insurance, and this was a great loss for the people there. The Center for American Progress estimated that there was about $70 billion in damages alone. And this brings me to my next point, economic burden. Rising sea levels threaten all essential services such as energy, transport, and health, as well as various infrastructures such as roads, bridges, subways, water supplies, and more. These structures all serve to make our daily lives easier, and with rising sea levels and more frequent storms and other weather and disasters, these structures will be more frequently damaged and we will not be able to use them, and this will make life more difficult as well as rebuilding more difficult. Using New York as an example again, the New York Times states that $129 billion in the form of real estate is in floodplains, and floodplains are low-lying land areas that could be very easily subject to flooding. In the scenario that New York was to be flooded yet again, a lot of money would be lost, and this would create a burden on society. Many buildings would be destroyed again or damaged, and many people would be homeless. Businesses could file for bankruptcy, and this will place a very heavy burden on society. This connects to my next point, disaster relief and taxpayers. It was estimated by the American Center for Progress that about $136 billion were spent on disaster relief from 2011 to 2013. And this means that about $400 from each household's taxes went towards disaster relief. Although this number at the moment is not very large, however, in the future, as damages go up and the storms reach further inland, the cost will also go up and disaster relief will be harder. On to my next point, environmental strain. As the sun warms the waters, water will expand when it's warm, and as the expanding warm water continues expanding, it makes ice melt, and as ice structures and glaciers melt, this will further add to the size of the ocean. And as well, inland water is being used up normally, and it also evaporates naturally, and this evaporated and used up water is going into the ocean instead of inland, and then the inland water is being used further, and this causes a great imbalance between inland and ocean water. The rising ocean is placing a huge stress on ecosystems and habitats, regardless of inland or coastal. For inland habitats, as I said previously, the inland water sources are being used up both by humans and by animals, and also evaporating naturally. And as these resources are being used, their habitats are slowly deteriorating. And as for coastal ecosystems, floods and other water-related storms are slowly destroying them. And for humans, it's not such a big problem because we can just relocate into a hotel or motel or some family's home. However, for animals, they do not have this sort of luxury, and they will slowly die out. In conclusion, rising sea levels have many disastrous consequences, including frequent and increasingly major flooding, extreme economic costs, and other severe environmental damages. Flooding will soon become a norm for coastal settlements until they are slowly swallowed up by water. If nothing is done to stop the continuously growing ocean, the land that we live on and survive on will slowly disappear.
Thank you, Andrea. Our next speaker is Jonathan, who will be speaking about the effect of meat consumption on the environment.
So I found that nothing really says I don't want to be here, I want to go eat than a big image of meat. So anyhow, I was researching my topic and I found on the internet this picture of beef, and for some reason it made me hungry and it made me salivate because I just wanted something to eat. And I wondered why could an image, just a few pixels on my screen, cause me to want to go and get some food. Well, I did some research and it turns out that uh, over 10,000 years ago, when our ancestors were hunter-gatherers and traveled with the food source, they ate a diet of mostly meat, and their brains had to hardwire a reward system and a desire for meat, so they would start seeking more meat. And this was possible because there were less humans and more animal varieties in which they could hunt. So following this graph, they could sustain themselves off of the greater food source they were hunting. But nowadays, the population went from 40 million to over 7 billion, as you can see. And this has some adverse effects in that we have to create large factories and huge farms in which we try to pack animals as tightly together so we can get this taste of reward every now and then. And this has raised some issues in a lot of areas. One of them being efficiency, because now that we have to raise more animals, it causes us to create these inefficient systems that are not efficient in energy transfer, in resource allocation, in land allocation, nor in the amount of biomass that we have to generate. This can be illustrated in this graph as in a normal ecosystem, this is what the graph would look like, where each trophic level has to trophic level is the levels you see on the left hand side. Anyways, each trophic level must be at most 10% of the level below it, because the organisms also need to use the energy they require for themselves, and they can't transfer all the energy to whoever's eating them efficiently. So only about 10% makes it. And the sad thing about this is that this is also the ideal scenario. So in the case that of reality, according to Oil Drum, it's shown that pork is actually 12 times less efficient and beef is a whopping 25 times less efficient. So that raises some issues in energy and how we could feed a lot more people if we didn't have this system. But this is only talking about energy. Let's talk about real units we can describe in. So to create 1 pound of beef, you need 2,500 gallons of water and 12 pounds of grain for every pound of beef you would produce. And that is something that could feed a lot more people if we didn't try to generate this beef and just divided up the grain and water. This was shown by Earthsave down in the right hand corner. This also translates to an issue in land allocation, because we can see that in agricultural land, if we were to use it very more efficiently, we could feed more people. But as of now, the current agricultural land, 80% of it is used for livestock, and 60% of all agricultural land is used just for cows, feeding them and raising them. The problem with that is that cows only account for 2% of the entire world's consumed calories. When beings that requires 60% of the land, it could produce way more if we didn't try to produce beef. From counting chickens, it also is shown that this is a problem in biomass, because for every 8 and more than 8 chickens, we only have 1 person. So that means to say that people, on average, eat the equivalent of more than 8 chickens, the produce of 8 chickens. And this is disregarding the other food sources they eat, like cows and vegetables and other food sources. Now, this is also translated to an issue in climate change. Since we are trying to push this inefficient system through to produce us some reward, it causes detrimental results in climate change, being that it's a large factor because it produces a lot of methane, and there's a general large lack of awareness for this issue. A statistic by The Guardian shows that the meat industry alone produces more greenhouse gas emissions than all the cars, trucks, and planes in the world combined. And this is very surprising because we usually would think that these forms of transportation are what's producing a lot of greenhouse gases, but in reality, something as simple as just eating a hamburger has created much more greenhouse gases than what we usually think it does. The reason it does this is because of how livestock works. There's a subportion of the animal group known as a ruminant type of animal, which has four stomach chambers, and this produces methane. The problem with methane and why it is second only to carbon dioxide in greenhouse gas prominence is because it's 84 times as potent as carbon dioxide, and it has a larger initial impact. So it's produced, although it may be produced less than that, it's a lot more potent, like a lot more potent, and causes a very profound impact in the environment. And this would all just be a fact that I'm stating if there wasn't anything we could do for it. Except the sad thing is that we can do something for it, and it's largely because of our ignorance that we aren't doing anything for it. For instance, here on the screen shows a graphic of the country's awareness of this issue, and what's notable about this is that countries with greater awareness, usually have less meat consumption, and vice versa. And this was kind of disappointing, as this guy from a study pointed out, that it was disappointing that developed countries who eat a lot of meat are usually the least aware about meat being an issue. And overall, this is not to say that we shouldn't eat a hamburger, because hamburger and meat are delicious, and they do give an easy way for us to fill our reward system. But it is also important to keep in mind that whenever we take a bite out of a hamburger, we could also be taking a bite out of our world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Our final speaker today is going to be Alex. Get his slideshow up. There we go. Alex is going to be speaking about how climate change affects agriculture and farming.
Climate change poses a major challenge to the USA's agriculture and global agriculture, as well as being a complex role agriculture plays in social and economic systems. Climate change has the potential to disrupt food availability, reduce access to food, and affect food quality. Climate change is negatively affecting agriculture. It affects the soil, precipitation patterns, and temperature patterns. Climate change, so my first point is climate change affects soil. Climate change can have a large impact on many different types of soils, as well as the function that soil performs. For example, soil can be dried out and rearranged during droughty or windy weather due to changes in the weather because of climate change. As the soil is dried out, plant growth is reduced, which also reduces the stability of the surface layer and allows more erosion. An extreme example of this process is desertification. Soils that are losing stable plant communities become unstable themselves and begin to shift like desert dunes. Worldwide, there are more than 50% of land degradations that can be attributed to desertification. There are several ways that climate change will affect soil. Soils are part of the global carbon and nitrogen cycles. The carbon-based gas, carbon dioxide, and methane, and the nitrogen-based gas, nitrous oxide, are important greenhouse gases. So as carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide levels change in the atmosphere, there will also be corresponding changes in the soil. Researchers can already see the effects of climate change globally and in European soil. For example, according to the Economic Research Center, the most recent report on climate change shows major impacts on the soil in Europe, and it also shows that the soil moisture has significantly decreased in the Mediterranean region and increased in parts of northern Europe since the 1950s. The report projects similar effects for the coming decades as the rise in average temperature continues and rainfall patterns change. This brings me to my next point, changes in precipitation patterns. As temperature rises and the air becomes warmer, more moisture evaporates from land and water into the atmosphere. More moisture in the air generally means we can expect more rain and snow, called precipitation, and more heavy downpours. This extra precipitation is not spread evenly around the globe, and some places might get less precipitation than they used to get. That is because the climate change causes shifts in the air and ocean currents, which can change weather patterns. NASA has stated on their website, current climate models indicate that rising temperatures will intensify the Earth's water cycle, increasing evaporation. Increased evaporation will result in more frequent and intense storms, but will also contribute to drying over some land areas. As a result, storm-affected areas are likely to experience more precipitation and increased risk of flooding, while areas located far from the storm tracks are likely to experience less precipitation and increased risk of drought. Because of the changes to the atmosphere due to climate change, it can hold more moisture, which results in more downpours and the intensity of the downpour, which also increases the chances of flooding. One study from the Climate Reality Project concludes that 60% of the rain and snow that falls over land comes from moisture originating from the oceans, and the other 40% is recycled over continents. China, for example, gets most of its rain and snow from evaporation over Eurasia. The rate of evaporation from the ocean is increasing as the world warms. Think about heating a large pot of water on your stove. The higher you turn the dial, the faster the water evaporates. Pretty much the same thing happens with the planet and globally. The higher rate of evaporation contributes to more extreme rain and snow events. And this brings me to my third and final point, climate change is affecting temperature patterns. Temperatures over the past 30 years have risen significantly. Temperatures from 2001 to 2010 was the warmest decade ever recorded. As the Earth warms up, heat waves are becoming more and more common in some places, including the United States. Heat waves happen when a region experiences very high temperatures for several days and nights. The Climate Science Special Report, or CSSR, created by a U.S. government organization that coordinates and researches global climate change, states it is extremely likely that human influence has been the dominant cause of the observed warming since the mid-20th century. For the warming over the last century, there is no convincing alternative explanation other than human influence. Finally, you can see how climate change is negatively impacting different aspects of agriculture. Global warming is affecting the speeds where crops grow and how fast they mature, causes irregular rainfall distribution globally, and destroys nutrients in soil. Imagine a world where healthy food is a rare thing to eat, meals will be cut, and poverty rates will rise. This can all be caused by climate change and its negative effects on our farming, crops, livestock, and fishery on a global scale. If you don't want to live in a world like this, we have to start doing something to stop climate change before things get too far and we can't go back to the world where we used to have good agriculture and farming.
Nicole and I are so proud of these kids and what they've achieved in this short week that we've had. They've done a terrific job. Their speeches were great. Their visual aids were great. Nicole, I'd like to thank you for being our visual aids whiz and operating everybody's slideshow. And we thank you very much for attending our presentation. Nicole, did you want to add anything else?
I hope you guys enjoyed that. I really did. I think it turned out great, and good job, everybody.
Yeah, very, very pleased with our results today. Terrific job, guys. Really, really proud of you. Wish you an awesome, awesome school year and hope to see you sometime. Thank you so much, everybody.